I never thought my life would get turned upside down by some kid barely out of high school. But here I am 33 years old, wiping down the counter of my husband's coffee shop, trying not to cry in front of customers because some 19-year-old thought it was funny to call me names I wouldn't repeat in church. My husband Mark and I have been running this small-town cafe for 5 years now. It's nothing fancy, just good coffee, homemade pastries, a few regulars who come in like clockwork. Things were steady, simple until Mark insisted we needed young blood to help around. Enter Tyler. 19, lanky, always wearing a smirk like he knew some joke the rest of us missed. I didn't think much of him at first. He was polite during the interview, if a little cocky. Mark liked that he was local, from a good family. His dad was some bigwig in town politics. The first couple of days were fine. Tyler learned fast. Customers liked him. He had this easy, smooth way of chatting people up that made tips roll in. Mark was thrilled. Me not so much. Because it started small. The first time Tyler was wiping tables and said under his breath, "You really shouldn't wear that, it makes you look old." I thought I misheard. I asked him what he said and he shrugged like I was crazy. "Nothing, Mrs. Carter." Mrs. Carter. Like he was trying to remind me just how much older I was. I let it go. People say dumb things. But then it escalated. Fast. One afternoon I was restocking the pastry case, kneeling down, and Tyler walked by and muttered, "Nice view." Loud enough for me to hear, quiet enough that Mark didn't. I spun around, glaring at him. His face was blank. Like he hadn't said a thing. Again I let it go. I shouldn't have. By week 2 he wasn't even hiding it. Tyler started calling me Grandma. In front of customers. Laughing about it like it was some hilarious inside joke. "Hey Grandma, do you want me to get that for you? Looks heavy." Mark told me to lighten up. That Tyler was just a kid. Doesn't mean anything by it. But it wasn't harmless. One day while I was counting cash in the back office, Tyler barged in. No knocking. He leaned against the doorframe like he owned the place, grinning. "Hey Grandma," he said. "You really shouldn't stress about the money. Mark's the one in charge anyway." That one hit harder than I'd admit. I wasn't just Mark's wife, I was co-owner. But here was this kid acting like I didn't matter. Like I was some relic hanging around, useless. When I told Mark again, he sighed. "Babe, he's 19. You're overreacting." That was the first time I felt this weird little crack between me and Mark. Like we weren't standing on the same side anymore. I tried brushing it off. Ignoring Tyler. But he made it impossible. One Friday night we stayed open late for a town event. Things were busy, crowded. I was in the back storeroom grabbing extra milk when the door creaked open. Tyler again. Only this time he wasn't smirking. His face was serious. And that scared me more. "You really think you're so important around here, don't you?" he said, voice low. "What are you talking about?" I asked, forcing myself to sound calm. He stepped closer. Too close. I could smell his cheap cologne. "Mark only keeps you around because he feels bad for you," Tyler said. "Old lady like you past your prime." I froze. Then I snapped. "Get out," I said, loud enough that anyone nearby would have heard if they'd been listening. But no one came. Tyler didn't move. "Or what?" he said, tilting his head like he was daring me. "You gonna fire me? Mark wouldn't let you." That was when I realized just how bad it had gotten. Tyler didn't respect me because Mark didn't back me up. And I didn't know what to do. The real twist came 2 days later. I was sitting outside the cafe on my break, trying to breathe through the weight in my chest, when a woman sat down next to me. Blonde, sharp blue eyes. I didn't know her. "You're Mrs. Carter, right?" she asked. I nodded slowly. "I'm Claire. Tyler's mom." My stomach dropped. "I wanted to apologize," she said, looking tired in a way I recognized all too well. He did the same thing at his last job. At the hardware store. They didn't press charges, but maybe they should have. Felt like the world tilted sideways. Turns out Tyler had a habit. This wasn't new. And Mark? Mark knew. Claire told me she warned him during the interview. That her son had boundary issues. I sat there numb as she stood up again. "I just thought you should know," she said. "Before it gets worse." And it did. That night I confronted Mark. Told him everything. That Tyler made me feel unsafe. that he humiliated me, that I couldn't work with him anymore. Mark didn't say a word at first, just rubbed his temples like I was giving him a headache. I can't just fire him, he finally said. His dad's connected. That was when I knew. It wasn't about me anymore. It was about Mark's pride, his business, his image, and I had a choice to make. My hands were shaking as I stared at Mark. I couldn't tell if it was anger, fear, or just plain disbelief. You knew, I said slowly, voice quieter than I expected. You knew about Tyler, and you hired him anyway? Mark wouldn't look me in the eye. Instead, he busied himself wiping down a perfectly clean countertop. I thought it'd be fine. Claire said it wasn't serious. Besides, we needed help. We needed help, I repeated, like tasting bitter medicine. So you brought someone into our cafe who disrespects me in front of customers? Who makes me feel unsafe in my own business? Mark let out a long breath, pinching the bridge of his nose. You're making this a bigger deal than it is. That's when something inside me cracked. I wasn't sure if it was a little piece of love, or just patience that broke off and floated away. I'm not coming in tomorrow, I said, my voice shaking only slightly now. I'm not setting foot in there until Tyler's gone. His head snapped up, finally looking at me. Anna. No, I cut him off. I mean it. And I meant it more than I thought I could. That night was one of the longest in my life. I laid awake in bed while Mark snored next to me, feeling like a ghost in my own house. Around 2 a.m., I got up and sat in the kitchen with a cup of tea, scrolling through my phone. That's when I found something that made my stomach twist. A post in a local Facebook group. Avoid Carter Cafeteria employee harasses women. It had a blurry photo someone had taken of Tyler behind the counter. Below it, comments poured in, women mentioning things he'd said. Customers sharing how uncomfortable he made them feel. Mark hadn't just hired a kid with attitude. He'd hired someone with a reputation. And apparently I wasn't the only victim. The next morning, Mark left early for the cafe. He didn't say goodbye. I watched him pull out of the driveway through the window, my tea cold in my hands. I stayed home. I cleaned the house. Did laundry. Anything to distract myself from the growing ball of rage inside me. But by noon I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my keys and drove to the cafe. When I walked in, the first thing I noticed was how quiet it was. Too quiet. Half the tables were empty. Then I saw them. Tyler behind the counter, chatting up a teenage girl who looked barely 16. She was laughing nervously, twisting a bracelet on her wrist. I felt sick. Before I could even think, my feet moved me toward them. Tyler looked up, smirked when he saw me. Morning, Grandma, he said. That was the last straw. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I just walked behind the counter, grabbed the keys to the register and turned to him. You're done, I said calmly. Get out. Tyler raised his eyebrows, clearly amused. I don't think Mark would like that. I don't care. It wasn't until that moment I realized how true that was. I didn't care if Mark threw a fit. I didn't care about connections or small-town gossip. I cared about my dignity, my safety, the safety of every woman who walked through that door. The teenage girl slipped away quietly while Tyler and I stared each other down. Finally, he snorted. Whatever. This place sucks anyway. He grabbed his backpack from under the counter and sauntered out like he owned the street. I locked the door behind him. My hands were still shaking, but I felt lighter somehow. That's when I turned around and saw Mark standing in the doorway to the kitchen, arms crossed. I told you not to do that, he said, voice low and tight. I stared at him for a long moment. And I told you I wouldn't work with him anymore. Mark shook his head like I was some child who didn't understand the rules. His dad. I don't care about his dad. Something about the way I said it must have caught him off guard because he didn't say anything for a while. Just looked at me like I was someone he didn't quite recognize. Maybe I wasn't. Maybe I'd changed. 2 days later, the Facebook post blew up. Local news stations picked up the story. Claire's name got dragged through the mud, but so did Mark's. People wanted to know why Carter Cafe had hired someone with such a history. The cafe lost customers. Mark lost sleep. And me? I found a weird kind of peace in the middle of all that mess. Because for the first time in months, I wasn't afraid to walk into my own business. One night, about a week after Tyler left, I was closing up by myself when I heard the bell over the door. I turned, ready to tell someone we were closed, but it wasn't a customer. It was Claire. She looked worse than the first time I'd seen her. Dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back in a messy bun. But her voice was steady when she spoke. "I'm sorry," she said again. "For everything." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to scream at her, blame her. But another part, maybe the part that had spent years trying to keep everything together, just felt tired. "It's not your fault," I said quietly. Claire gave a sad little laugh. "Feels like it is." She pulled something out of her purse, a folded-up piece of paper. "I found this in Tyler's room. Thought you should have it." I took it from her, my fingers trembling. When she left, I unfolded it. It was a letter. Handwritten. From Tyler. I expected it to be something snide or cruel. But instead it was a mess of scribbled lines, half-finished sentences. "I don't know why I do it," one part said. "I can't stop. I hate it." I sat down hard on one of the chairs, staring at the words until they blurred. Maybe it wasn't about me. Maybe Tyler was broken in a way I couldn't fix, and Mark, maybe he was just too scared to admit it. That night I went home and told Mark I needed space. We didn't fight. There wasn't any screaming. Just silence that felt heavier than any argument ever could. I stayed with my sister for a while. Helped her paint her guest room. Watched movies late into the night. Felt good. Simple. A few weeks later Mark called me. "The cafe's doing better," he said awkwardly. "People are coming back." "That's good," I said. There was a long pause. Then, "I miss you." For a second I didn't know what to say. Then I remembered something my sister told me when I first moved in with her. Just because someone loves you doesn't mean they know how to treat you right. I took a deep breath. "I miss you too," I admitted. "But things have to change." "I know. Maybe we'd work it out. Maybe we wouldn't. But either way, I wasn't going to let myself be silenced again. I wasn't anyone's grandma. I wasn't invisible. I was Anna Carter. And I deserved better. It had been almost 2 months since I walked out of the cafe and moved in with my sister. But that morning I found myself standing in front of Carter Cafe again. The windows were gleaming. A new "now hiring" sign hung in the window. I could see Mark inside, bent over the espresso machine, frowning in concentration the way he always did when he worked alone. I wasn't sure why I'd come. Habit maybe. Or some stubborn thread still tying me to this place. I hesitated before pushing the door open. The bell chimed, sharp and familiar. Mark looked up instantly. For a moment his face flickered with something like hope, then guilt. "Anna," he said, setting down a cup. I took a breath. "Hey." We stood there, silence stretching between us like a bridge waiting to collapse. Finally Mark cleared his throat. "You look good." I didn't smile. "You look tired." That earned a small laugh from him. "Yeah, I've been trying to run things by myself. Not as easy as I thought." He meant it as a joke, but I couldn't help hearing the weight behind it. It wasn't just about business. It was about us. I sat down at the counter. The same spot I used to every morning before opening. Felt both familiar and alien now. "I saw Claire again," I said quietly. "At the grocery store." Mark's face tightened. "How's she holding up?" "Same as before. Worn down." I hesitated. "Tyler's not around anymore. She sent him to some rehab program out of state." Mark rubbed the back of his neck. "That's good, I guess." I looked at him, then really looked. He'd lost weight. His eyes were rimmed red like he hadn't been sleeping much. "You could have told me," I said finally. "About Claire warning you." "I know." His voice cracked on those 2 words. For the first time I didn't see my husband, I saw a man who'd made a bad choice and didn't know how to fix it. "Why didn't you?" I asked, softer now. Mark leaned on the counter, staring at the worn surface between us. "Because I thought if I admitted it, you'd look at me like I was weak." "That's not weakness, Mark. That's honesty." He swallowed hard. "I didn't want to lose you." And just like that, all the anger I'd carried cracked into something smaller. Sadder. "I never wanted to leave," I admitted. "But I had to." "I know." We sat in silence again, the hum of the espresso machine filling the air. Then Mark straightened up. wiping his hands on a towel like he was steeling himself. "I've been thinking," he said, "about everything. About us." I didn't interrupt. "I've been talking to someone," he continued. "Therapist. I go twice a week now." That surprised me. Mark wasn't the kind of man who talked about his feelings, much less paid someone to listen to them. "Really?" "Yeah." He gave me a sheepish half-smile. "Turns out, bottling everything up for 10 years isn't healthy." I let out a short laugh despite myself. Who knew? Mark's smile faded into something more serious. "I want to fix this, Anna. I really do. But I know it's not just about me saying it, it's about doing it." I didn't say anything right away. My heart was thudding too loud in my ears. Then I nodded, slow and deliberate. "I want that too." We didn't hug. We didn't kiss. But something between us shifted like the first stone pulled from a dam, letting water start to flow again. Over the next few weeks, I started coming back to the cafe. Not full shifts, just mornings. Enough to ease back into things without losing the ground I'd gained. Mark and I still lived separately. He respected that. We texted more. Sometimes we'd have dinner, talk about things like we were dating again instead of 10 years married. And people noticed. Customers who hadn't seen me in months smiled when I walked in. One older woman even took my hand and whispered, "Glad you're back." But there was still fallout. One afternoon, I was wiping down tables when a man I didn't recognize walked in. Tall, sharp suit, sunglasses tucked into his shirt pocket. "Anna Carter?" he asked, looking directly at me. "Yes." He handed me a card. "District Attorney's Office. I'm here about Tyler." My stomach dropped. "What about him?" The man, Detective Rogers, explained that they'd been building a case. That Claire had finally come forward with details about Tyler's behavior. That several other women from other businesses had filed formal complaints. "We wanted to ask if you'd be willing to give a statement," he said. "We understand it's difficult, but it could really help." I sat down, my legs suddenly weak. I don't know. Rogers didn't push. "Take your time. Here's my number." That night I sat in my apartment, staring at the card like it was made of fire. I didn't want to go through it all again. Relive every look, every comment, every moment Tyler had made me feel small and afraid. But then I thought about that teenage girl. The one twisting her bracelet while Tyler leaned in too close. And I thought about myself. About all the nights I'd gone home feeling invisible. The next morning I called Rogers. "I'll do it," I said, my voice steady for the first time in a long time. Giving my statement wasn't easy. It brought everything back sharper, rawer than I expected. But afterward I felt lighter. And the town noticed. News spread fast in small places. People started treating me differently. Like I wasn't just Mark's wife anymore. I was Anna, the woman who'd stood up. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about Tyler, really. It was about not being silent anymore. One evening, Mark and I sat on the back porch of his house, drinking coffee as the sun set. "I'm proud of you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For not letting me drag you down with me." I looked at him for a long moment. "You didn't drag me down, Mark. I chose to stand up." He nodded slowly. "Still." We sat there until the sky turned dark, not saying much. And for the first time in a long time, the silence between us felt easy. Not heavy. Not dangerous. Just quiet. By the end of that month, I officially moved back home. We didn't celebrate it. No big announcement. Just boxes unpacked slowly, one by one. The cafe felt like ours again. We hired a new kid, Rachel, 17, sharp as a tack and not afraid to tell Mark when he was being a grump. I made sure we had a new policy. 0 tolerance for harassment. Signs posted. Rules clear. Some people grumbled. Said I was being too serious. I didn't care. One Saturday, as we were closing up, Mark handed me a small box. "What's this?" I asked. He shrugged, looking almost shy. "Open it." Inside was a silver bracelet. Simple. Elegant. "I figured you deserve something that's just yours." I slipped it on, my throat tight. "Thank you." Mark didn't say anything, but his hand brushed mine lightly as we locked up the cafe together. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were finally on the same side. 6 months later, I stood in a courthouse lobby, clutching my statement folder to my chest like it was armor. The air smelled like floor polish and nerves. Claire sat a few seats away from me. We hadn't spoken much since everything blew up, but now she looked over and gave me a faint nod. I nodded back. Tyler's trial wasn't a huge one. No TV cameras, no reporters swarming the building. But the courtroom felt full anyway. Local business owners, old regulars from the cafe, people who'd been following things quietly from the sidelines. Mark was there too, sitting behind me in the gallery. I could feel his presence without turning around, solid and steady in a way he hadn't been before. When they called my name, I walked up to the stand with my heart hammering. I told the truth. About every comment. Every look. The night in the storeroom when I felt like I didn't even exist as a person anymore. I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't scared, because I was done letting fear control me. When I stepped down, I felt a weight lift off me I didn't even know I'd been carrying. The trial lasted 3 days. Tyler didn't say a word the entire time. His lawyer did all the talking, painting him as troubled, young, a product of difficult circumstances. But in the end, the jury didn't buy it. Tyler was found guilty of harassment, along with other charges related to past incidents. He wasn't going to prison, but he was getting probation, mandatory counseling, and most importantly, wasn't going to be anyone's secret problem anymore. When the verdict was read, I didn't cheer. I didn't smile. I just breathed. Afterward, Mark met me outside. We stood together on the courthouse steps while people streamed past us. "You did it," he said quietly. "No," I corrected. "We did it." Because no matter how much had broken between us, I knew now that we could rebuild. Not as the same people, but as better ones. Later that night, back at the cafe, I unlocked the front door by myself. It was closed, but I needed to be there. To stand in the place where everything had started. The now hiring sign was gone. In its place, we'd put up a new sign. "This is a safe space. No harassment. No exceptions." I traced the edges of the letters with my finger. Behind me, I heard footsteps. Mark again, of course. "You sure you want to be here tonight?" he asked, voice soft. "I need to be." We stood in silence for a long while. Finally, he asked, "So what now?" I looked around. At the worn countertops. The scuffed floor tiles. The rows of coffee mugs behind the bar. "Now," I said, "we keep going. Because life doesn't pause after a verdict. It doesn't freeze in a moment of victory or loss. Keeps moving. And so do we." 2 weeks later, we held a small event at the cafe. Free coffee for anyone who wanted it. A way to say thank you to the town for standing by us. Rachel worked the counter like a pro. She'd been promoted to shift-led me idea. While people milled around, chatting and sipping lattes, a woman I'd never seen before approached me. "You're Anna Carter, right?" she asked. I nodded. "That's me. I just wanted to say thank you. For what you did." I tilted my head. "Do we know each other?" She smiled faintly. "Not really. But my sister, she worked at the hardware store. Tyler bothered her too. She never said anything until now." My throat tightened. "I'm glad she's okay." The woman touched my arm gently. "She is now." After she left, I stood there for a minute, letting that settle. It wasn't just about me anymore. Or Mark. Or even the cafe. It was about all the women who felt invisible until someone finally said, "Enough." That night, Mark and I locked up together, same as always. But as we stood in the quiet, I reached for his hand first. "Thank you for showing up," I said. He squeezed my fingers gently. "I'll keep showing up." And for the first time in a long time, I believed him. I know some people reading this might wonder why I stayed. Why I didn't just walk away for good. But life isn't always black and white. People make mistakes. Big ones. Painful ones. What matters is what you do after. As for me, I'm still standing. Still fighting. Still pouring coffee behind the same counter. Only now, when I look in the mirror, I see someone I'm proud of. Not just Mark's wife. Not just a small-town cafe owner. Anna Carter. Someone who knows exactly what she's worth. And refuses to let anyone take that away again.